Gantz. Whether you love it or hate it, this infamous yet popular manga unfortunately doesn't have a lot of scale figures, which can make it hard for you to get your hands on what was already released. But in this video, I'll be opening up the sword version of Reika and Anzu, which are based on the character models of Gantz Zero. I'll go over their details, explain the difference between the sword version and the shotgun version, and give my opinion whether or not they're worth hunting for. But before we get started, let's quickly summarize my shipping experience. Yep, that's exactly how the box came. Slightly crushed. This is one of the dangers of buying on eBay, because the box cardboard itself was not well reinforced, and bubble wrap doesn't really help much when you pancake it. Luckily, nothing was broken, but the boxes were slightly bent out of shape. Now with that being said, let's get started with the unboxing. Our first figure is an erotic manga artist who died and found herself participating in the Gantz hunts. This is the Anzu Yamasaki sword version figure that was manufactured by Union Creative. And while this character is modeled after the Gantz Zero design, the outfit really reflects the manga's chapter title page art and not the movie or regular manga outfits. Anyway, let's get her open and go over my thoughts. Now the first question I ask myself is, why did I get the sword version and not the shotgun version? Well, aside from obvious reasons, the sword version outfit seems to be the most popular outfit that is used in the other Gantz figures and statues. Again, for obvious reasons. Therefore, I guess I got it because these outfits are iconic. Anyway, let's get into the sculpt. I'm surprised, there's actually a lot of good detail here, especially around the open mouth and the belly button and the hair. Also the dimples and the curves that cause the body to stand out. Only the boots seem like they received not as much of attention as the rest of the figure, but the figure's really well sculpted. Now moving on to the paint, the first thing I want to call out is the sword version and the gun version are essentially the same figure, with the exception that her skin is painted either skin tone or the color black, and the weapon hand is molded based on the weapon they're holding, so it'll come down to whether you like the skin to look like skin or the skin to look like it's supposed to be fabric. Now talking about the actual paint job, it's actually really good. The key callouts here is the hair, where it's actually lighter on the top and blends darker at the bottom. It's a really nice touch. And then we have the glossy outfit that blends from black to gray shading. The shading is great for the upper part of the outfit, but the leg shading is not something I'm 100% sold on, though I'm not sure how I would do it differently. And then there's the skin, it's powder soft, and uses darker tones to represent shadowing on the body. The boots are still the weakest part here. They feel like a blob of gloss paint. The pose, however, is really good, nothing crazy. I love the turn of the head, with the one knee up, and the arched back, and the tilted hips. Where I think the pose really shines is when both figures are back to back. As a pair, I think in that case the pose is perfect. Lastly, the base. You know how I feel about generic black bases. However, one cool thing that I found about this base that's a little bit different is it has thick metallic pegs. They're actually kind of cool, though I'm not sure why these would be much better than the thin metallic pegs. Ultimately, I hate to say it, but this figure rates 9 out of 10 for me. I keep on telling myself I should rate it lower, but I can't. I love the sculpt, I love the paint job, and it all just comes together so well. Now moving on to our next figure, this figure is of a famous Japanese idol who also died and found herself also participating in the Gantz hunts. This is the Reika Shimohira sword version figure that was manufactured by Union Creative. And unlike the Anzu figure, this figure's had 2 releases. Anyway, let's get her open and go over my thoughts, though I don't imagine that they'll differ much from the previous figure. Truth be told, Reika is probably my preferred figure of the 2. It might just be the pose or the long flowing hair, it just draws more attention on its own. Starting with the sculpt. The sculpt is just as amazing as the Anzu figure. I think everything that I said in that review applies here. For the paint, it's really good, but I do have a few callouts. For one, the hair is a solid color. I really wish it was a bit darker with some gradient detail, and perhaps a little bit more shine to it. The eyes are another thing that I noticed that was different from the Anzu figure. Anzu's eyes are glossy, while Reika's eyes are a bit more matted and lack the contrast that make them pop. I'm not sure if this is because this is the first generation of the figure, and the second generation of the figure has the eyes that match Anzu's. I really don't know why there's a difference, because when it comes to the rest of the body, they match perfect. The pose is where I feel that Reika has one up on Anzu. I feel that this pose is more noticeable and iconic. It definitely draws my attention to the figure. And lastly, the base. The same generic base. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna comment about these generic bases, because they suck. Why? Because these figures look amazing side by side, with as little gap as possible. But the large base on Reika ensures that the figures keep a good distance apart. I'm 100% gonna make a custom base to ensure that these girls are closer together. Okay, that was my rant. But overall, I'm loving this Reika figure. Easily a 9 out of 10. After all, this figure did draw my attention to the Anzu figure, otherwise I would have overlooked her. But you know what would make these figures 10 out of 10 for me? Placing them together. These figures really do complement each other. And oddly enough, I'm really glad to have them in my collection, because despite them being the most openly lewd figures that I own at the moment, they are really the iconic figures that you think of when you think Gantz. Anyway, that's all that I got to say for this figure unboxing. Feel free to tell me your thoughts, and if you prefer the smaller unboxings versus the larger ones. I hope to see you guys again, and take care.